Hey guys, it's Dr. Minardi here, bringing you all things STEM. From my journey to yours, we are on an adventure together. Today, we are joined by an absolute boss of a female in tech, in the tech space, Danielle. So let's welcome to the stage, Danielle. Hey Danielle, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
So
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Danielle Cantrell-Sikstrom is the global gaming content strategist at Intel. In this role, she develops and executes the strategy for video and retail gaming content for Intel Core processors and Intel Arc graphics. Previously, she was an account manager at Sony Electronics in LA, covering all audio, video, and camera sales and training. Prior to that, she worked at Sony PlayStation doing marketing and merchandising. In her free time, she builds PCs. That's exciting. Plays and streams video games and enjoys live music. So again, Danielle, thank you so much for joining us today. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week. I guess the first question that I tend to ask our guests is, tell us a little bit beyond the bio. Tell us about you and how you got into tech.
Well, my dad raised me alone, pretty much. And so from the time I was 3 on, I lived with my dad in Portland, Oregon. And he worked at Intel. And so he would just kind of bring home computers and be like, here, we're going to work on this together. So we would have a PC set up like in the kitchen and just start working on it together. So I learned to work on them pretty early. Like I think I was 6 or 7 when I started working on them with him. And he also had me do all the stuff where I was like climbing behind the TV to set up all the cables like for the audio video stuff because I was small. So it's just like a convenience thing. But it got me really into technology and just kind of seeing what I could push it to do. And I got into games, I think, literally when I was 1 or something. Starting off with like Nintendo and then going from there. My mom got me into Nintendo. And so I was playing games for the entire time and realized that I could join the two together and build gaming PCs. And with that, you get a lot more performance. And so I wanted to do something with that. Like that's really exciting for me to, I guess, not have barriers, like be able to run every game and do anything you want to do without having any sort of technical snafus. So I just like to do that. And then I moved to Los Angeles when I was 22, and that was to get into the gaming industry. And I did that. I got a job at PlayStation. And a year after I got that job at PlayStation, I was recruited to Sony Electronics. And so I got more into audio video space from there. But I think in 2018 or so, I started dating my now husband, and he was in Oregon. And so we were long distance for 4.5 years, and I decided that that was too long. And so I started looking for jobs up in Portland and moved back up here. Now we live together and having a baby in a few months.
Oh, congratulations. Yay. I remember when you got married.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
So that's I love that story. And there's, in all of the guests that we interview, there's always a sort of like there's always the skill set and being exposed to the tech or to the area of science, right? But then there's also the person. And I had the pleasure of actually meeting your dad when we participated in the tech panel, and he was such a joy. So how has he, what did he do at Intel and how did that influence you?
He helped to build a computer. It was a supercomputer called teraflops, and they actually built it so that we could stop testing nuclear, like physically testing it. We could just do the calculations on a computer instead. But teraflops was massive. Like I obviously my memory is probably off because I was 6 or 7, but it was like a huge cold room full of all these computer like I guess pieces that were all the size of refrigerators. And they're all put together, and I like that blew my mind. And I would go to take your kid to work day and stuff like that with him, and he would either throw me in a box full of like bubble wrap so I could just sit there and happily pop bubbles, or like let me go around with him and see what he was doing. So that got me really interested in it because the number of calculations that you could do per second at that point was like it had never been done before. And so it just showed that technology can do a lot more than we could imagine. And if you're able to stop setting off bombs to test them, then that's probably a good thing, right? Like, we would like less nuclear bombs. So it was
Yeah, amen to that. No, and the simulation aspect, it takes so much. It's so interesting. We had another guest who was doing water simulation around small molecules, and even the compute power that's needed for that is just it's exponential just because of all of the different interactions and types of interactions. So I could only imagine for a nuclear bomb and the simulation of the impacts, how that could be. So you talked a little bit about obviously the tech aspect, but then I'm curious, what drove you to move to LA for gaming?
There are a few things. One, I get cold very easily. And, Portland is a little colder than Los Angeles, and it was in 2010, I think. So we're still trying to recover from everything that had happened in 2008. Like, I graduated high school in 2007, and had kept trying to like get jobs. Like, I worked at GameStop for a while, and GameStop to another company that then went bankrupt. And then I went to another company, and they also went bankrupt because no companies were doing very well at that point. And so I just like, I felt like all the signs were kind of pointing to just like get out. And my mom lived in California. And so I was like, all right, well, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. Like, all the game studios are in Los Angeles anyway. And so I figured it would be easier to get a job down there and make connections. And I had already been going to things like E3 and PAX and Game Developers Conference and stuff like that to try to meet people and kind of get into the industry, or at least make connections in the industry. And so I had a bunch of friends in the industry and was able to just use those to my advantage, I guess. And just like, hey, like, do you know if anything's come up? And I ended up getting another job or I got a job at GameStop in LA, like, right when I moved there, just because it was something to do. And was recruited by someone who worked at PlayStation from that GameStop. So I got into the industry through that. So it was just
That's all.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I mean, it's so funny because I graduated in 09 and 10. And the reason that I went to grad school was exactly because of the recession. Because I knew, I was like, I am never going to get a job, or if I am going to get a job, it's unpaid or it's terribly paid. So I might as well just go hang out. So I totally, I get it. I get it. But I think that's exciting, and that's the power of networking, right? A little bit of what you're talking about. So can you talk a little bit about tips and tricks that you used in order to get your kind of foot in the door?
Yeah. I think honestly, a lot of it is just showing that you care and that you are going to do really, like, that you're going to do your best work wherever you're at. So showing that you're, I guess, like, making a good example of yourself when you're at work, so that you can make those impressions while you're there, and then going to events and going to places where the people you want to be like are hanging out. So like at E3, that was like my dream thing to, like, that was my number one life goal, to go to E3 once when I was in high school. And then I went there when I was 18 or 19. And then I went every year after that. And so it was just, for me, it's just like meeting people, talking to them, building genuine relationships, and making sure that you actually show them that you really care about them and you want to help them out. Because I don't go into these things thinking like, oh, here's just someone that I can use as a leg up or something, right? For me, it's I want to talk to someone, build a relationship, and then we can see where we can help each other. And so I was able to do that with a friend and bring him into E3 and get him a job at like a game studio that he really wanted to work at, because I already knew a bunch of people who worked there. And so I think for a lot of it, it's just making sure that you're looking for ways to give as well as ways to receive, and then making sure that you keep those people in mind, like even little things like remembering birthdays and stuff like that. Like, I have every birthday written down on my calendar, and every year I copy all of them down and add more, just so I know that, like, people know that I appreciate them and that I know that they're there and really value them.
That's brilliant about the birthday things. I need to do that.
Very helpful.
It's like immediate family, and then everyone else is kind of like, I don't know. I'm gonna bank on Facebook to remind me.
Yeah, that's
no, but that's brilliant. I mean, it's personal connections, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly it. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, the culture at PlayStation, like, dislike, challenges, and then what was your day-to-day sort of job?
So when I worked at PlayStation, I was in charge of 78 different stores in the Los Angeles area. So I managed, I think it was like 5 different accounts, and I was in charge of the marketing and merchandising and training of all the employees that were in those stores for all PlayStation products. So the goal was to spend 1 hour per visit in each store. So you'd try to visit at least 5 stores per day, but in Los Angeles, there's also a lot of traffic. And so there would usually be a few hours to get there and get back. Because I think I managed everything from Monrovia down to Manhattan Beach and then up into the San Fernando Valley, which is, I think if you're driving from one end to the other, it would probably be like 4 or 5 hours on a bad day. And that plus the like the time that you spend in stores, it was just a lot of time management. So just making sure that you had, like, you took notes of anything that needed to be fixed, and you had a lot of stuff set aside to be to replace anything that needed to be fixed. So I actually had a second bedroom that was full of like PS4s, controllers, all the cables, like everything that you would need to replace anything in any store. So it had all the maintenance on the demo units that they had. And then making sure that you're really aware of all the games that are coming out and knew everything you could about them so that you could answer any questions that anyone had and help people with any questions they had about like PlayStation or any technical difficulties they were having. So I worked on an awesome team out there, and it was like all of California, I think. And we all communicated with each other about like errors that we were running into, and it sort of built camaraderie, even though we were all working remotely and very far apart from each other, and just tried to communicate all we could. And yeah, I worked there, I think from 2015 to 2016. And I was actually in, there were a few stores that I would visit pretty frequently, and I ran into someone who worked at Sony Electronics. And he saw me working really hard all the time and was like, oh, I can get you a better job. And so he offered me a better job a year after I started at PlayStation.
So then what was the day-to-day to that job, and what were the skills that you leveraged from PlayStation over to Sony Electronics?
Well, a lot of it was just product knowledge. And a lot of it, because I was working with audio video stuff, I could just talk about video games with people who are trying to buy TVs. A lot of people are buying TVs for them, And so for me, it was like I was still doing trainings. I was still learning a lot about the products and making sure that I knew all the technical details about each product and really knowing how they impacted people. So like knowing the cost or like knowing the benefit versus just like the tech specs. And, if I tell someone you have a 120 hertz panel, that doesn't mean that much. But if I say, oh, like the motion's going to look this much better, then that actually has an impact, and they'll actually understand what you're talking about. So like training the employees so they could sell to people. And then I was responsible for the sales in those stores. And I'm slightly obsessed with spreadsheets. And so for me, like being able to look through an entire, look through all the sales for every product that I had and just like make the numbers go up, it's great. It's like a video game almost. So it's very rewarding to see the numbers go up. And then with that, I was responsible for 5 stores. So we were able to spend much more time in each store. And I think that really helped with building better relationships and making sure that people knew a lot more about the products and really understood like how I wanted them to talk to customers and how we wanted the product to be represented.
So there's a great deal of not only product knowledge, but also people knowledge, right? And
Mhm.
then plus overlay that with not only those who are portraying your product, but also those who are purchasing your product. And so your key end stakeholder, I guess, or your end user, if you will. So how did you draw and I guess keep kind of your mind central around all of those? Because you don't think of that as like a STEM skill,
Mhm.
but it's still you have to leverage a lot of your product knowledge, which is inherently tech.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it is just about making sure that you're explaining the specs and explaining the tech, like tech details, in a way that feels more human. So, like the Olympics are on right now, and there have been a lot of moving things, and you can tell if you're watching on a lower quality TV that like the ball might be like juddering, or you might like see it like just not moving as well. We had a lot of demos that would show it like side by side, or we could actually like put a demo into a TV and just say like, look, this is what it looks like on this TV. This is what it looks like on this TV. Like how would you like to your TV to look at home? And a lot of people just don't understand the. I guess they don't understand the difference in what they're buying, because every company has their own jargon, right? Like every company is like, oh, like this motion is called this, and this motion is called this, and it's all the same thing relatively, right? Um, so we focused a lot on processing when I worked at Sony Electronics. So we would talk about, I think the last one that I worked with was the X1 Ultimate processor, and I was able to explain the benefits of those processors to people in a way that showed that it actually meant something, and that it was like, I promise you, I'm not just trying to I'm not just trying to sell this to you. I would sell you another TV if I thought it was better for you, which I think helped too. Because like if you have integrity and you show that you have integrity, then people trust you more. So I think those would be the main things. Would just be like making sure that you have integrity, that the employees trust you, and management and everyone like in the company knows you, trusts you, and believes what you're saying, and then they're more likely to repeat those things and just like know what you're talking about. It's like with any sort of science, right? Like, or any sort of STEM. If you show proof and you have evidence, then yeah, like it's a lot more believable than if you're just like, oh well, I think this is better because I said so. So
No, I love that. And the documentation and portraying the information in a way that is, I think, conducive for the user. No,
I made
that's
spreadsheets for
brilliant.
it too.
I'm sorry?
I made spreadsheets for it too, where it's like
Oh,
here's this technology, here's what it looks like, here's what like the TVs that have, or here are the TVs that have it, and here's like why you should choose this one over another one. So, and I made that public to anyone, so any of my employees could use it, and any of the customers could use it. So
oh,
that
that's
helped too.
even better. That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just being very
And
transparent.
then
So.
yeah, and okay, so from there, then you transfer back to Intel to come back to Portland. And I'm curious about the changing from, audio, video, camera, sales and training to processors and graphics, because those are very different products.
Yes,
Those are very different things.
kind of.
So so I guess explain to me and educate me, how are they the same? How are they different? And how did you take that evolution?
Well, okay, so with Sony Electronics, I mentioned that I was already focusing on processors a lot, but it was TV processors. And because I stream on the side, like I stream video games, I had actually like rage built a TV, or not a TV, I had rage built a computer, because I had a laptop that was for streaming before, and I was like, oh, this is overheating. I don't want to do this anymore. And so I just decided I was going to build myself a PC. Um, and so I got very accustomed to, like, honestly, it becomes sort of a project thing where you just want to upgrade all the time. And so I built a PC, and then I just wanted to upgrade it all the time and wanted to play with it all the time. And so I learned a lot just from experiencing that and building my own PC, and just like, I don't know, I think like building it over and over and just like becoming really passionate about it made it a lot easier. And so when I did my interview with Intel, I already understood the processors. Like I had an Intel processor in my PC, and I've always used Intel because my dad worked for Intel, and I've been loyal to them ever since, right? And so I think I already had a lot of technical knowledge. I had moved into a role when I worked at Intel. I first started doing retail and channel marketing, and so I was creating retail assets, which would be pretty much what I would be using if I were working at Sony, or if I were working at, or I guess like Sony Electronics or Sony PlayStation. So I was just kind of working higher up in the chain and making the assets that I wished I had when I was working at Sony Electronics and Sony PlayStation. So like, here are all the tech specs. Here's everything that you need to know. Here's how it will impact you. And putting those into assets to try to explain it in a prettier way than giving people an Alexa spreadsheet. So that was my main strategy.
So, so what are the processors when you think about that, and when you they're actually being applied to a variety of different things, like you were talking about TV processors versus computer processors versus, I don't know what other kind of processors. I would assume there would be others in other instrumentation. Yeah, and everything. And so do you have a industry focus, or do you have like an environmental focus, or
I usually focus on consumer devices mostly. And so like when I was working on TVs, I was working on I was talking about the processors that are in the TVs and like how it would impact an end user. With my current role, I'm still I'm just starting to take on graphics right now, and so that is very new to me. But with the computer processors, it's always just looking at how it would actually impact gamers, because I work specifically in gaming marketing. So like what are you going to get? Like, are you going to get a FPS increase, or like a frames per second increase in your gameplay, or is the gameplay going to be smoother? And like, will you see less stuttering or less like fewer frame drops and things like that? So your gaming experience is actually improved by having a better processor. And I feel like a lot of people look at gaming and they're just like, oh, I just need to upgrade my graphics card. But there's sort of a balancing act when you're building a computer, where you don't want to have a CPU that's overpowered with a GPU that's underpowered, or vice versa. Because either way, you're not going to get the best benefit, and it's better to kind of balance that out so that you get the best performance, and you can spend, hopefully less money, because you don't want to just lose out on performance that you'd miss out on if you had the wrong balance.
So what is a day in the life today of Danielle at Intel?
I have a lot of calls. So I balance, let's see here. I am doing a lot of work on upcoming products that we have coming out. So, excuse me, since I'm now creating like video content and retail content, I'm working on all the campaigns that we have for upcoming products, and also some educational content, because I want to be sure that people know what they're getting. I feel like a lot of times people will just kind of look at numbers and be like, okay, I want the bigger number, like bigger number is better. And they don't necessarily know what that's getting for them. And so I'm trying to kind of explain that to people as well. And doing some really like base knowledge stuff as well. But I think like I usually work from around 8 to 6 or so, like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it's usually like start the day off with a few calls, and then I'll usually have an hour or two to do some work on some little projects, and then just like a lot of calls. Honestly, it's been probably I'd say on average probably 8 to 18 calls over the last year. And we just communicate a lot, make sure that we're collaborating, make sure that everyone involved is aware of what's going on, and knows what products we're working on or what projects we're working on, and that everyone's kind of kept in the loop. And there have been some like restructuring and stuff recently, so a lot of it has also just been making sure that anyone who wasn't on the team before is still aware, or is aware of what's going on, and can kind of be onboarded as well. So that's most of it, I work from home, so it's usually like wake up, 15 minutes before and just kind of start doing whatever I need to do. But I think it's a global role. The hours do tend to extend sometimes as well. So I might have call at 8 p.m., which is great.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's always fun. I mean, you get to meet different people and you get to experience the global team. I think it's interesting to me, though, in doing this podcast and talking with a variety of different people in tech, that there's a great deal of the job that isn't just tech. It's people, it's collaborating. And that's one of the things that I don't think necessarily that is a trait that is well instilled in those that are STEM infused for educational. It's like, oh, go and do your laboratory work, submit your lab report, and you are good. And your grade is what your grade is, reflecting on your sole work. Whereas when you actually enter the industry or you enter the working world, it is not that. It is you and your work are highly dependent on this collaborative environment.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that a lot. And that was some of the best advice that I got from someone when I was first going to all these conventions and stuff, trying to get into the gaming industry. I asked what the best thing to do was to someone who, she was a female game dev and she had worked on everything. Like she had done every part of game dev. And she said that was how she stuck around, was that she made herself irreplaceable. Like if you have someone who can kind of do everything and knows everyone and, really is resilient in the way that you can kind of put them in any situation and they'll be able to do it or take care of it, then that is, that makes it so that person has to, like, you have to keep that person. And so that's generally what I try to do, especially because I love learning about new stuff. And so in my current role, I've been learning more about like branding and going into, like, I covered a sabbatical for someone who is in another business unit and just kind of branching out and sort of reaching little tendrils out all the time to make sure that I am constantly learning and constantly picking up new things. And then my team starts to rely on me. And that, like, for me, that's really valuable because I want to feel like I'm needed and I want to feel like my role is important and I'm actually having an impact on the greater program or projects.
Are you happy with where your career is at, or would you like to take a pivot? Or
I love my job, honestly. I have a really fun time just learning about new topics. And most of the people that I work with, I would say like 99% of the people that I work with, I really look up to and admire. I've been extremely fortunate to always be with teams that I feel like I have something to learn from. And like with Intel, there are a lot of people who have been with the company for like 20, 25 years. And so there's so much to learn from them, right? Like they have so much tenure and they've kind of seen the ups and downs and like how the company has changed over the years. And that gives me a lot of hope because they, like you can tell, they really care. Like they believe in it. And if I can, I would like to be there for 25 years more, maybe like we'll see how things go. But I would love to be one of those people that other people look up to and who kind of knows everyone and knows everything about all the projects surrounding me.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. So that's forward looking, right? And so if you then look backwards, given your route, would you have changed anything if you could?
Yeah, I think so. So when I was in school, I went to community college and college right after I got out of high school, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I think that there was a lot of pressure to kind of choose one career or choose one area that you're interested in and just go with that forever. And I was, 18 and had no idea what I wanted to do. Like, I feel like that was a really big commitment for me at the time. I wanted to work in tech and I wanted to work with video games and stuff, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And there are so many things that you can do in those fields, as I found. And so for me, I felt like I was investing a lot of money and not really knowing why I was doing it. But I think through my 20s, I actually learned how to enjoy learning and how to really, like, I started listening to like some science podcasts and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is actually fascinating. Like, maybe I can learn more about this. And then I wanted to learn more about everything. And so I started taking classes again when I was working at Sony Electronics, and was able to, I think I just started getting straight A's because I cared and like really wanted to learn this stuff rather than just seeing it as I need to learn this stuff so I can make more money later on. And that was, I think, just the pivot in how I was perceiving learning really helped a lot. And if I had been able to learn that earlier, or somehow like drill it into my head when I was in high school, like this is why learning is important, then that would have had a huge impact on how much focus I had put into education. So I don't necessarily regret that I didn't finish my degree, because for me, it was looking at it like I have a lot of debt that I'm earning or that I'm piling up. And I also have a job where I'm having to work like 40 to 60 hours a week. And for me, it was impossible to balance. And I think like just that focus would have made it easier for me to really value what I did and probably get better grades while I was in school, rather than just kind of giving up on it. Right? Good. I guess that's a good way to sum it up.
No, I think that's sort of highly reflective of why I started STEM from, mainly because I quickly realized that the curriculum basis and the educational system was very proficiency based, and it wasn't actually aligning to how can you use the skills that you're building up in any sort of core curriculum and actually translate that into industry. It's really the basis of learning that is really highly translatable. Obviously, some core instantiations are required for some jobs, but not across the board. And I think the other piece to that is, which you kind of alluded to too, is that like, okay, at 18, I don't know what I'm going to be doing when I'm, 40. But the other thing is when I'm 40, especially in tech and engineering, that might not be available in 18,
Yeah. Especially for the new technologies that they're developed so quickly.
Right. So it's hard to put that sort of retrospective in, sort of like, oh, you need to make a decision right now. No, I don't.
That's another thing. Like I was interested in so many things. Like I was interested in history, and I was a history major for a while, and I was interested in psychology, and I wanted to do that for a while. But it's like, I think almost being interested in a million different things makes it really hard to just drill down and be like, okay, this is what I want to do forever. Because I don't want to do that forever. I want to do a million things forever. And so that's honestly one of the things that's been a benefit for Intel, is that Intel is such a massive company that you can, like, if you're sick of doing marketing stuff, you could probably go and work in sales, or you could go work in the business unit. And they have something called gigs where you can actually just go take someone else's job for a few months and just be like, hey, like, covering for someone's maternity leave or sabbatical or something like that. They'll just open it up and just like, hey, anyone want to work on like brand for a while, or go, and they'll help train you for different jobs too. So that makes it's probably what's contributed to a lot of people staying there for longer, is that they're able to move if they want to and still stay within the same company.
Well, and that's interesting to juxtapose that to like startups, which has been, my past couple of years, because you're forced to wear different hats and to contribute to different things just because there's no one there to work. Like there's no one to take over the gig. But that's exciting though, that they're very forward thinking in that way, and exposure. Like it's great to give others exposure to something, and they can either, love it, or they can go, okay, thank goodness that this has an end date because I do not like this. This is not what I was thinking it was.
Yeah. There are a lot of programs like that at Intel that, like, I have a few friends who just kind of worked with my team for a few months, and they're like, okay, on my next rotation and on my next rotation. And so they get a lot of experience in a lot of different fields pretty quickly. And like I've just sort of gotten, like, I didn't know anything about esports, for example, when I first started. And one of my good friends works in the esports part of Intel. And so I've gotten to travel with her, like to Germany and to Dallas, and to go to some of these events just to help, like, I would help train on processors and everything. But learning more about esports by experiencing it in that way was really cool too. Something that you would think that we would all know about as gamers, but like I just wasn't into those games for most of my life, and so just learning about new things to get excited about is also just really inspiring.
Yeah, precisely. So we're nearing the end of our time. And my last question is, if you were to, Danielle, year 2008, 2009, what words of wisdom would you have imparted on her?
I think there's always more time to learn, and always more time to like change. You don't have to stick with the same plan that you have right now, and learn for the sake of learning, not necessarily because you think that it will get you some benefit in the future. It's the same with the networking. Like, build that network because you want to help someone else and because you want to grow as a person, not necessarily just because it's going to help you. But a lot of the time it really does. So, and also I would say, think about the way you think. Like, try to focus on like realize your faults in how you might be perceiving things and take those into consideration. Like, try not to have an ego about it. Just be aware that like your way of perceiving things might not be the right way, and there are always other ways to look at things. So, always, I would say, go for evidence, but um, go with, I would say, yeah, go with evidence. Make sure you stay
No, I
curious
love that.
forever.
I love that. Curiosity forever. That's perfect. I think it's perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I valued this conversation greatly. You have had such a tremendous career so far and have so much to offer. I think, being with Intel for the next 25, 35 plus years.
Yeah, just stay there until I retire. I would be very happy.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time. At STEM we are working towards making all STEM careers achievable regardless of your identity, background, or even access to resources. Here at STEM we will introduce you to all things STEM, whether they be careers, research, tips and tricks, and even inspiration. Thanks all for watching and learning with us today. And don't forget to ask yourselves, where do you want your journey to stem from? Bye, everyone.